Namaste and a very good evening, dear friends. A very warm welcome to our chief guest, the Honorable Minister of External Affairs of the Government of India, Sri Subramaniam Jaishankar ji. Author Mr. Prem Prakash, veteran journalist and former executive editor of India Today, Mr. Venkat Narayan, senior journalists Ms. Sheila Bhatt and Mr. Sushant and all our esteemed guests is an initiative launched by Prabha Khaitan Foundation to organize book releases across multiple cities in India and overseas. This year, when the pandemic forced the world to hit the pause button, Prabha Khaitan Foundation tried its best to ensure that its patrons were not denied their regular dose of literature and culture. Recently, we have held virtual book launches for the work of Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Mr. Hamid Ansari, Ms. Megha Majumdar, Ms. Jyotsna Bhargav, to name a few. In the past, we have had the privilege of hosting book launches in person for India's most famous journalist duo, Mr. Veer Sanghvi and Ms. Seema Goswami, Australian author John Zubrachiki, best-selling writer of mythological fiction, Mr. Amish Tripathi, former minister and wildlife enthusiast, Ms. Beena Kak, motivational speaker, Jasmine Waldman, and many other eminent writers. Today, we have all tuned in to participate in the launch of the much talked about book, Reporting India by Mr. Prem Prakash. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to share with you that this is the first book we are launching whose first edition is already sold out pan India before the book has even been launched. Mr. Prakash is a veteran journalist in India, currently the chairman of ANI, India's premier multimedia news agency, which he has helped set up. He has interacted with every Prime Minister of India and interviewed many of them on camera. He has also worked with pioneering broadcasters in France, Germany, and the United States. He was among the founders of Viz News, which is now Reuters Television, the world's biggest news agency. During his illustrious career, Mr. Prakash has covered some of the most important stories of post-independence India, including the 1962 Indochina War. He was also at the forefront of war coverage during the 1965 war against Pakistan. Reporting India is a culmination of the many years of Mr. Prakash's service to the world, always covering the most impactful stories in Indian history, after putting himself directly into the ring of fire to bear first-hand witness to natural calamities, wars, military coups, and insurgencies. To launch Reporting India, we have with us this evening the venerated chief guest, Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Sri Subramaniam Jaishankar. Amidst the rebalancing of the world powers, Honorable Minister has been the messiah, strengthening communications and relations globally for India. In the scheme of the global architecture, our Honorable Minister is ensuring that India's pillar stands tall and the world takes note of India being truly an engine of growth, a force to be reckoned with, and a home where talent is truly harnessed. Sir, even during the pandemic, when citizens of various countries were stuck outside their homeland, what you did for our fellow Indians was truly incredible. You, sir, led by example as the world took note of this incredible feat. You initiated and masterminded the Vande Bharat mission, rescuing over 100,000 of our fellow countrymen from over 40 countries. Prior to assuming office as the Minister for External Affairs, Subramaniam Jaishankar ji has been a career diplomat and also served as India's ambassador to the US. It is my proud privilege, sir, to introduce you this evening. I now request the chief guest of the evening, Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Sri Subramaniam Jaishankar, to kindly release Mr. Prakash's book, Reporting India. May I also request Mr. Venkat Narayan, Mr. Sushant Sareen, Ms. Sheila Bhatt, and Mr. Prem Prakash to join in.
Congratulations, Mr. Prakash. Sir, congratulations.
Thank you.
I would now like
Thanks a lot.
to invite the Honorable Minister to kindly say a few words.
Prem Prakash ji, dear friends, I'm truly pleased to join you all this evening for the release of Shri Prem Prakash ji's memoirs, Reporting India. We may be discussing a book, but in reality, we are really celebrating his life. And what a life it has been so far. Going through the book, my immediate reaction was that I was looking at an Indian forest camp. He's been there, done that, reported it, and most important, shaped our recollection of events. Just think about it. Someone who has covered the liberation of Goa, who was at Bombdila and Sela in the 1962 India-China War, who actually climbed the Hajipir Pass in the 1965 war, who was present in Tashkent when Lal Bahadur Shastri ji passed away, who covered the Bangladesh war from inside at great personal risk, who actually took the shot of Rajiv Gandhi when he was attacked in Colombo, and who extensively covered the Afghan conflict. This is pretty much the history of India from the foreign policy perspective for half a century since independence. And his pictures became our memory. The domestic aspects of his journalistic career are no less impressive. Here is a person who, as we just heard, has virtually talked to every Prime Minister of India. He is present at all the key moments of our nation, at its seminal events. His interviews, in many cases, have themselves played a part in our history. Looking back, Prem Prakash ji is at his detached best as he reflects on all of them. We may or may not agree with many of his impressions and comments, but I can tell you they make a very engrossing flow that I feel a younger generation, less conversant with the era, would value very much. Naturally, as a journalist, the chapter on the emergency is both very personal and very passionate. And I can tell you, as someone who was still at university at that time, but was already familiar with the press, this is a chapter, an account with which I can readily identify. From a reader's viewpoint, the memoirs are notable, obviously, for what they convey, but as much for what they don't. The cumulative picture is of Prem Prakash ji as the great recorder of our times. Clearly, being at the right place at the right time is not an accident. He gives us a sense of how hard one has to work to make that happen. And indeed, the initiative and even the gumption that is needed for this. I was particularly taken in by how he had defined his own ambition early in his life to shape the image of India abroad. In a different way, that has been my life purpose as well. And I can say from my perspective that the country has gained enormously from his efforts. I was also struck, I must say, by the singular absence of post-partition nostalgia that one would have expected from someone of his generation. I only wish that there were more like him. What also comes through is the deep underlying optimism that continues to permeate his outlook even now. There is none of that, art was so good and now kind of looking back. On the contrary, he is very confident that the current India has the ability to set the wrongs right. So now, as someone who's known him for years, I can completely understand why. Prem Prakash ji has built a solid legacy in the ANI that the next generations are carrying forward so ably. He has every right to be proud of his life's work and even more so of its further evolution. So a 75-year journey, one of memorable moments, unique experiences, and great accomplishments. Congratulations, sir. And thank you very much for sharing them with us.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. As you rightly said, the younger generation will be blessed to have the recount of this era from the Indian Forest Camp. I now invite Mr. Sushant Sareen and Ms. Sheila Bhatt to commence with the evening's discussion with Mr. Prem Prakash. I hope the audience will sit back and enjoy this conversation.
Thank you. Sheila, my job has been made very difficult by the minister because a lot of the things he has flagged in his opening remarks was stuff which I was going to say introducing Mr. Prem Prakash. Uh, so if I'm repetitive, please bear with me, because I was going to mention the Goa operations, I was going to mention the 62 war, Haji Pir 65, 71, Rajiv Gandhi in Colombo. So, sir, you have preempted me. And of course, I was later on going to mention the nostalgic trip which most people from his generation go on when they talk about Pakistan. So, thank you for preempting me. But yeah, reading the book, sir, it's amazing. It's actually, one feels envious of you. Dr. Jaishankar said that you were in the right place at the wrong time, but I was just going to twist it a bit and say that you were actually you had a knack for being in the wrong place at the right time, because in the 1962 war, being out there.
I said right place at the right time.
Yeah, which is why I said that I've twisted it to say that you were in the wrong place at the right time, because going into in the middle of the war, going to Bhopal when the gas, nobody knew what the impact of that gas leak is going to be, and all the other experiences which you've shared with us in your book. So it's been a remarkable journey. But what I find amazing in your life story is that you are not only an entrepreneur, you've been a pioneer, because you've started, this whole television news in this country, and of course you've been, a great journalist. Uh, and what really surprises me is, when you take us back into the times and tell us about how difficult it was to actually get news out and deliver the news, especially visual news. That tells us how much the country has changed, how much, of course, the news business has changed, but how much this country has changed from a time when, if you had to go abroad, you had to fill up something like 20 forms and then get $4 or something, to now when you can just travel when you want to. You can get money and you can send money the way you want to. So, sir, I think that was a remarkable thing. And for somebody who was both a working professional and an entrepreneur in your own way, I thought that was remarkable. So I wonder if you can just tell us, how you manage these two things, because either one is an entrepreneur or one is a working journalist. But you manage the two things together. So that, to my mind, is the most remarkable aspect of your journey, sir.
Thank you.
Prem, we are waiting to hear from you.
I said thank you, and I'm kind of embarrassed with all this praise that you are showering on me. What I did was my job. I had to get into East Pakistan. I did it. Now, what we were hearing and what some reporters from Calcutta were filing was hearsay. But if the world had to know what General Tika Khan was doing, you had to get inside. And now I often wonder at myself that did I not realize that I had a very young family when I was entering? That they were I could be arrested by Pakistan Army and then shot dead. Or I was a Punjabi and from Bengali, that it didn't matter inside East Pakistan. Whether I was an Indian Punjabi or I was a Pakistani Punjabi. I was just a Punjabi, that's it. But I did it. And I remember when I went to Jessore, being an Indian covering Jaishankar and in the foreign media, I had to make sure, no doubt I covered the dead bodies, etc., lying all around, which Pakistani soldiers had shot. But I went to Jaishankar railway station to ensure that the world knew that I had been to the location. Here is the Jaishankar railway station. It's not somewhere else. So I did that, and I was lucky to come back. When I came back to the border, there was a military intelligence officer from Fort William who was there. He asked me where I had been. I told him, and he kind of laughed. I said, "What do you mean, why are you laughing?" I told him what I had seen. He said that I told him that where I was at a junction, on the left there was a barricade. So we went straight. He said, "You are very lucky. They must have been saying their namaz or something that they didn't shoot at you." Because that barricade was the cantonment barricade. And that's how I survived there. And this happened day after day after day. And realized that Pakistan filed 2 or 3 protest notes, both to Reuters and to Viz News, that I was crossing into their country illegally. Why was I doing that? I should have stopped. And that's it. But the world knew it, India knew it, what had happened, and what was going on, how the villagers being pushed into India from Pakistan. This was a deliberate act. There were not only army, Pakistan army, but also a group known as Razakars or something like that, who were also involved in uprooting not only Hindus, but also Muslims who were supporting the Awami League of Sheikh Mujib. So we had refugees coming into India by over 1 million, both Hindus and Muslims. Now you couldn't have over 1 million people now. They had to go back. That we had a pretty good, strong government in Delhi, which took a decision to whatever it took, and we know what happened after that.
So if I can ask you a follow-up on this.
Yes.
You say we had a very good and strong government in Delhi. But when one reads your book, you talk about the Haji Pir Pass, and you then talk about Shimla. And in both those cases, there seems to be a bit of a lament in you that what we won on the battlefield, we lost on the negotiating table. And what I wonder is that how come such good, strong governments and such shrewd politicians like we have in India could make those kind of blunders of losing on the negotiating table or not pressing ahead with the advantages which we had gained on the battlefield and losing those advantages on the negotiating table. What was behind that?
I have often wondered, and maybe Jaishankar, you can help me on that. I've often wondered, are we Indians as a race very sympathetic or very friendly? We have always been very emotional even towards the Chinese. Why? They're a different country. And we captured Haji Pir with great sacrifice. Remember, I climbed with the army, and I know how we climbed. And army was not prepared to give up. But I know there was a very heavy Soviet pressure on Lal Bahadur Shastri and the ministers. I was present at Shastriji's dacha. I've written in the book. When one day Kotijan lands there, he holds Swaran Singh ji by hand, and I followed him quietly at a distance, and I could hear everything. He said, "Swaran, I want this to be signed." And Swaran Singh ji replied, "I still remember distinctly, I can only convey it. He's the leader, he decides." So this agreement was not to be signed because the Indian army was not in favor of giving up Haji Pir. We were all taken aback because we were all told that, okay, now we are leaving tomorrow, so you guys can go into the market, but if you want to go shop and so on. Soviet officers came running, agreement is being signed. And we were taken aback. Obviously, you see, somewhere I have felt that in the game of brinkmanship, we lost out on many occasions. We lost out in Tashkent. We lost out in, I don't know what pressure was there. I have also mentioned the name of our ambassador there at that time, call, and did he have a role in it? I have no idea. Did he, we lost out in Shimla again. We were told the talks are broken down because we were determined that the Prime Minister was keen, I'm sure, that's what I heard, that we must settle the Kashmir. All that we settled was that ceasefire line came to be known as line of actual control. And we believed in the words of Bhutto and signed the agreement. What could he do after that? He just went back. They got their 93,000 men back. And all right, Mujib got out. And this is, we have always lost out on brinkmanship. Only in Agra, we, uh, when Musharraf threatened to leave, Atalji simply said, how can I stop a president if he decides to leave? And he left. That was that. But we have always lost on in the game of brinkmanship. I've always felt on those occasions.
Okay, before Sheila comes in, I
Yeah.
have let me just push you on this one question one more time, and perhaps a comment from Dr. Jaishankar would also be quite useful. In your book you write, every prime minister thinks he or she is the person who will resolve this issue about Pakistan, and every prime minister realizes somewhere towards the end of his or her term that this is a near impossibility. Now, what is it? What is this romance? What is this nostalgia? What is this delusion, if I might use that word? And this is not just people, who were nice people, people like Mr. Gujral, very good, sensible people. Even the most ruthless and the most shrewd prime ministers that we have fallen for this. We talk about Shimla and Mrs. Gandhi. We can talk about Prime Minister Modi in his first couple of years when he tried very hard to reach out to Pakistan. Successive prime ministers, all 15, 16 of them have done this. Why? What is it that we don't understand about Pakistan?
I wish I could answer that. Again, I would say, are we being naive or emotional or good people that this can work out? I don't think it can work out. I was born in Pindi, and it was okay during up to Ayub's time. But once Ziaul Haq came over and turned that country into pan-Islamic and extremism towards during Afghan war and all that, they've changed. They've totally changed. And I don't think there is going to be, I don't wish to be totally pessimistic, but I don't think there is a solution with Pakistan around the corner.
Dr. Jaishankar, would you like to weigh in on this?
Not really. I think it is Prem Prakash ji's book. So I don't want to barge into this one because this is a big issue. But I would only say that where Prime Minister Modi is concerned and this government is concerned, I think we have shown a lot of clarity that, they can't continue cross-border terrorism and expect then diplomacy to carry on. I think there's been consistency there.
No, this is true. This is true that, but other than his visit to Lahore, when he went to Nawaz Sharif's house, stopping over from coming back from Afghanistan, was it? Yeah, the government has been stiff. That's very good, really.
Sheila?
Yeah, good evening. Prem Prakash sir, congratulations for your book once again, for your book.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me, no? Huh.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Minister. How are you? And nice to see you here. And Prem Prakash ji, I wanted to ask you one important question there after reading this book. Can you, because now we are at a distance, we are talking in 2020,
Yes.
and you have really covered well with your all enthusiasm and in your young age, Nehru. So can you tell us in nutshell, how do you review the Nehru's legacy?
You see, his biggest legacy is democracy. Remember, he saw us as a nation through 3 general elections. Those 3 general elections left India's people with a habit of going to polls and electing a government. That's the biggest legacy. And he enjoyed, he was always present in parliament. And he used to interact so much with press, so much with media, that once somebody had suggested to him that newspapers are getting very critical and so on, and irresponsible, he said, I'm happy with an irresponsible but free press than a controlled press. It was only a prime minister like that who could say that. So that's his legacy, democracy that India we are enjoying. I personally feel it's the legacy given to us by him. He was the first prime minister. He was overseeing the implementation of the constitution. And in those 3 elections, India's people got into habit. That's it. There may be other things.
But what do you think?
Lots of other things. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that I asked you this with this current trend where Nehru's legacy is being reviewed also and criticized also in the government also. So I just wanted to ask you that how do you see the balanced way of looking at him?
You see, now he's been...
What is so, what is not?
Was he? I didn't hear it.
What is enduring? What is, after 40, 50 years, how do you review him?
You see, even now, what I would say, he did a lot of hard work for India. Remember, we never made anything. He ensured that every penny that India had was spent on the on building up infrastructure, new plants, new things. He did not nationalize even the foreign companies because if I remember, he said in Parliament, why should I waste my money in nationalizing something that already exists? With whatever money I have, I'll create something new. He did that. And education, yes. And I mean, all that he did has borne fruit. And remember when this setback took place, because he did not expect a war with China. He and Krishna Menon maybe had felt that the world had seen so much horror during the World War II that in future, because of UN, the nations will not solve their political problems through wars. Therefore, he neglected the army. But remember, in 20 months, I used to go there to the house regularly. In 20 months that he lived, he had built the Indian army from 250,000 to 500,000. He had rearmed the Indian army. He was concerned about Pakistan at that time. Pakistan was fully weaponized by Americans. Americans were no friends of ours at that time. They were hostile to us because they wanted us to join their alliances against Soviet Union. And we stuck to our independent policy. And it was only with the army strengthened. And remember, once Panditji died, he had managed with his diplomacy to keep Pakistan off. But once it died, Ayub immediately took the risk first in Kutch, and then Kashmir, and then the 1965 war ensued. And thank God that the army was strong enough, and we beat the hell out of them.
Sheila, can I just ask...
left by Nehru. The army was to fight.
Sheila, can I just ask a follow-up? Because
Yes,
so sir, look, I am one of those who believes that history needs to be questioned. You know, no leader should be deified to a point where nobody questions his legacy, nobody questions the right things which he did, and nobody questions the wrong things which he did. So I think if there is some amount of criticism which is coming Mr. Nehru's way, I think that's par for the course. This is what should happen in any democracy. But having said that, you see, in Punjabi they say that जो मुक्का लड़ाई के बाद याद आए उसको अपने मुंह पे मारना चाहिए. Mr. Nehru who used to fancy himself to be so clued in to international affairs, on geopolitics and all of that, for somebody with his erudition and his knowledge of the world, for him to imagine that there will be no wars in the world and the world has changed, this kind of romanticism, these kind of fanciful notions actually lead you to the kind of disasters and debacles which we had in 1962. For people to think, and then let's not just talk about Nehru. You talk in very glowing terms about Mr. Vajpayee and how his visit, which you went along also on to China, and how he put the Chinese at ease. Should we be actually be doing diplomacy in that manner? What was it that we never realized until Galwan happened? That the Chinese are a different kind of people. The Chinese are not going to be in international relations. Anyways, nobody is anybody's friends. But what is it about our leaders who would not give the similar latitude in domestic politics to their rivals, but when it comes to their rivals in international politics, they are willing to take them at face value? I don't think any Indian politician would accept any cock and bull story which his domestic rival would give him on face value. He would trust and verify. But when it comes to the Chinese, to the Pakistanis, to anybody else, we seem to take it, at face value, and then we say that we were betrayed.
You used a very nice word, romanticism. We have that habit, and I may be wrong in imagining about World War, their feelings in World War, but the simple fact is when General Timaya pointed out the Chinese threat, Krishna Menon ran him down, and General Timaya offered his resignation, which put pressure on Timaya to withdraw. But the simple fact is, General Timaya or the army had mentioned that China is a threat. Now, why they ignored that, why they were romantic, I really have no answer to that. That answer can only come from the Foreign Office. Why we have always romanticized these guys, or even Pakistan for that matter.
Sir, you have reported Nehru as a prime minister, Indira Gandhi as a prime minister, and Rajiv Gandhi as a prime minister. Can you compare all
Yes.
three? Who excelled with media? Who handled better, and why? Can you just give us some more insight into how three of them viewed media? Because we are from media. You are from media.
Panditji was very regular at his press conferences for all press. Panditji was very regular for an annual dinner with the Foreign Correspondents Club. I don't think the Foreign Correspondents Club has had any prime minister for a long time. The last may have been Indira Gandhi, for that matter. I don't know whether anybody else has come for a meet with the foreign correspondents. They have been neglected. But Panditji, even when he was not well in 1964, he came to the Ashoka Hotel and he sat on a chair, and we all sat around him on the floor, some otherwise, and he talked sitting on a chair. He never used to sit down to talk. He always loved standing. But then, in those 20 months,
do you remember anything he said about China then? Do you remember anything off the record in that chat in Ashoka Hotel? What did he say? What did he share? Tell us something what you have not written in this book. Tell us something unforgettable.
You see, when I mentioned to you the way he pulled me up,
is it
when
true
I asked
that because of the China, do you think? Pardon?
Because of China, what was that? I didn't hear your question.
No, did he die? People say that because of the shock of defeat.
Because of the shock and because he overworked himself. Madam, I can tell you that I used to go there at night and he would still be working. his staff would tell me कि पंडित जी 2-3-4 घंटे भी नहीं सोते. When I was interviewing him for his reaction on Kennedy's death, he fell asleep. I had to stop the camera and go to him and shook him and said, "Sir, I can't present the Prime Minister like this." He remarked to me, "You have broken my thought." But then he understood, and I put up some pillows around him and he got up. He gave his reaction in 2.5 minutes. And then as he got up to go inside, he came back. Prem Prakash, ये 7 बजे का क्या हुक्म था? So I had to explain to him why I wanted the interview only by 7 o'clock. Because those days there was no satellite, nothing. You had to pack the film, write a dope sheet, go to the customs, because India has always had these regulations and so many bureaucratic methods. Go to the customs, get it cleared, go to the airline, and all in 3 hours, and make sure that the film leaves and then reaches its destination next day for distribution, the report. So he was there. He was always welcome with the press. Mrs. Gandhi too, when she started. But then emergency, and after that, the story became different. And I mentioned that in a bit. Rajiv Gandhi was good. Rajiv Gandhi was a fairly practical person because he had worked, unlike many others. He had earned his living as a pilot, and he knew the problems that the businessmen and others are facing. If you ask any businessman, the certain regulations that he brought about in budget in those days were welcomed by them. I personally feel that if he had not been assassinated, and if he had come for the second term, our growth would have been very fast.
Okay, let us go back to China question. Sir, how do you look current Chinese invasion at the Ladakh border? Because you have covered Ladakh border and the same place. You have written in this book.
I have been to Penghong Lake and all the
Yes.
and all these areas. I've been to Dolas Bay also. Well, now, of course, it's comparatively very easy. We built the roads, we've done everything. And it's for the journalists to go there. I mean, it's for them to make their way in. It's not, the government is not a problem. I don't think there used to be problems in my time and you had to fight your way. But not now. Now the authorities are very friendly. The army is very friendly. Yeah.
What is your take? Why did Chinese do this? What is the message you get?
You see, I don't know. Again, this is not my question that I should be answering. I can only give you my guess. So this is a question again for the Foreign Office. The answer from they think Chinese think way back in history. They think Zoravarsi captured Ladakh, which was part of Tibet. And now, why did Nehru give up Tibet? I have questioned that. That was another wrong thing. We had a military contingent in Xinjiang. The British had made perfect arrangement for India's defense. They had political agents all over the place, like the Mughals had. And we gave up everything in Tibet, and we recognized their suzerainty. But Chinese didn't accept that. Chinese said no, they have sovereign rights over Tibet. So we have been too romantic towards Chinese. I mean, when the Congress was fighting, they sent Dr. Courtney's medical mission during World War II to China. Remember that?
Yes.
We have always romanticized Chinese. This Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was a nonsense.
Sir, Sheila, if I may ask
Please,
something.
please.
You know, you have taken India to the world. As a journalist, your primary focus was telling the India story to the rest of the world. Now, my question is, how come nobody in India so far, none of the big newspapers, none of the big media houses have brought the world to India, in the sense that, we have one or two journalists in 2 or 3 capitals around the world. Most of the stories which they give today are, stories you can get from any of the Western press. There is no story which is really covered from an Indian point of view to educate the Indian public on what is happening in those places. Now, I ask this question because now when we see Western coverage of India, there is so much drivel that is published by, the so-called mainstream papers in the West, the New York Times and the Washington Post, utterly ill-informed parachute journalists coming and doing really shoddy stories. But we don't have anybody from the Indian media actually covering the world for India. Do you not think that that is a major gap in our understanding of the world? Because we are understanding the world from Western eyes. We are not understanding the world from Indian eyes.
Sushant, there is a huge gap. Sushant, there is a huge gap. And I really can't understand as to why very rich newspapers in India, they're flush with cash, I can tell you that. They don't have correspondents abroad. I don't understand that. But compared to them, ANI's funds are very limited. And we make all out effort within our resources to cover, and we have people in London, we have people in Washington, we have people in New York, and we try to cover from Indian viewpoint. And but you are absolutely right. Why don't these people have? It's not that they are loss-making companies. No, they are not loss-making companies. They are making good profits, and they should base their correspondence abroad. I think the readers have a right to know the first hand of their correspondence rather than from second hand or third hand. Because what we get today is what is given by Reuters or AP or AFP or others. It should be given by PTI, it should be given by ANI, or it should be given by correspondents of Hindustan Times, Times of India, Hindu and all that.
Precisely. And forget about the rest of the world. Even the kind of coverage which we get in Indian newspapers about our neighborhood leaves most Indians utterly ill-informed about what is happening in Nepal, what is happening in Bangladesh, what is happening in Sri Lanka. And as a result, I think the public discourse in India is so much the poorer for it. And then, of course, there are other areas which are hotspots around the world. A war, for example, in the Caucasus, a war in the Middle East. Our entire coverage is by and large, from a Western perspective, which actually serves the Western purpose. It does not serve the Indian purpose. And I don't see how any Indian is better off for it.
I'm fully with you. I'm fully with you on that.
Yeah, Sushant, we should take questions also. There are a few questions. Can you please read out, Sushant?
I'm afraid I will not be able to because I'm on a different system.
Akriti can read out the questions.
Akriti can probably read that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take the questions post.
Yeah. Sure. Who is going to read out?
I'm doing that. Yes. Prem Prakash ji, the questions that have come from the audience, I'm going to take a few of them. So the first one is from Ms. Surbhi Jha. Do you think it's because India lets its moral policies guide over political decisions and plays it emotionally? Or is it India's own internal political instability that has caused all this chaos?
Repeat the question again.
Do you think it's the fact that India lets its moral policies guide over political decisions? Or is it that India's own internal political instability has caused all this chaos?
There is no internal political instability as such. But as far as the general decisions are concerned, we romanticize far too many issues. And that's what leads to certain instability in our decisions abroad. But otherwise, I think by and large, our government and our bureaucrats take correct decisions. It's not that they make any mess.
And we have Mr. Surendra Nath who's asking if you can speak a few words about the liberation of Goa. What was the world opinion about the Portuguese adamant stand?
You see, I have written in the book, the liberation of Goa. I see, from whatever we understood, Panditji was himself not very keen on that at a certain stage. But there was a feeling that Americans might turn it into R&R, rest and recuperation center for their forces, just as they had done for Hong Kong, which would have meant that during the Cold War, the American forces would have come bang into Goa virtually on our own territory. So that may have been the reason to liberate it. But all I can tell you is that the people of Goa at that time were not happy. Whatever was being said here about liberation fight in Goa was hardly there. Was not there. It was a pre-stage thing, and when we walked in, there was no fight as such. The army just walked in, and later on, the Portuguese government even put the then governor of Goa to trial because he had told his whatever few troops were there not to fight, because that would have only resulted in annihilation of their people. And when I walked in, because we were being stopped by the army not to go in there, but a very young, bright officer of the Foreign Office, S.K. Singh, he gave me the password to the war zone. Punjab, just at the time when the surrender was taking, all along landmines. To answer the main question of Mr. Surendra Nath, people of Goa were not for this liberation.
Okay, we have another question, Prem Prakash ji, from Mr. Ashok Malik. He's saying, you said Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai is rubbish. So can you tell us why did Nehru read China right, especially in light of the Sardar Patel letter?
I think I've already answered that in detail to Sushant and others. It's that we thought that we'll use diplomacy to sort out the problems we had with the Chinese. So Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was a slogan which worked out, and there was nothing to it.
Akriti, can I ask a question, please? So, sir, one area which I wanted to ask you about, your description of Afghanistan from the time you started going out there, Paris of the East, Paris of Asia, beautiful. And I've seen, my father was your contemporary and he would go to Afghanistan. The one thing he would was to send postcards from Afghanistan to us. And it was a picture perfect kind of a setting of the Kabul River flowing, cafes, bars, all sorts of things, a beautiful place. And when one reads your book, there is an element of pathos which comes out about what Kabul and Afghanistan was and what it became. Now, again, it seems that, there are going to be new convulsions in Afghanistan. With your immense experience, having watched Afghanistan, having followed the story out there, how are you looking at the future as far as Afghanistan is concerned? And putting your thinking man's cap on, do you think there is something which we can do now at this stage to try and, manage things in Afghanistan to the extent it is possible?
You see, Afghanistan is a very tragic story. Afghanistan really is the victim of Cold War. It is, Cold War was really fought hot in Afghanistan between Soviet Union and in proxy by Americans. Now, of course, Americans have fought it directly also. But and the whole world is suffering because of that, because this Islamic fundamentalism was born there. When in the first instance, when they couldn't defeat the Soviet and Afghan forces, they created this bogey of Islam in danger. But the people in Afghanistan were not for all this nonsense. People were very happy. People were very happy with the government. People were very happy even with Najibullah for that matter. It was a pity that India managed to bring out Najibullah's family, we failed to bring Najibullah out, just as he failed in Dhaka to save Mujib. But your question on India, yes, we are a big country. We are a big country. And Afghanistan needs all our help. And I think we should go out of our way. It's not going to cost us arm and a leg. We can afford that. We can afford that. And we should make sure that we do things for them. For example, why is Chabahar taking so long? Why is that not functional already? Why is that taking so long? Various things, these are the questions which need to be asked by all of you who are now in the field. I'm a retired kind of guy, but these are the questions you have to raise with the government. And I can assure you that it is in our interest that we help to bring Afghanistan back to what it used to be. Back to what it used to be. It was a country which was in many ways ahead of us when it was in its happy days. Your father must have told you that too. It was ahead of us in many ways, in its cities at least. So it's very tragic that what has happened to Afghanistan. It's very tragic. In many ways, this Taliban took them back to Stone Age. It's tragic, but India can do it. And I still don't know why Chabahar is not fully functional.
Have the audience questions floating in. I'm taking one more, sir. What has been the experience of writing this book and reflecting on your life been like for you?
What is the experience of writing this book and reflecting on my life? Well, it has been interesting. I was not planning to write. A lot of my friends were pushing me because I had these first-hand accounts. And I was in Bangalore after my surgery last year, and I had all the time on this in this world. And my son was there with me, looking after me, and we sat down, and I kept dictating to him, and he did this, and Sanjeev did the work, and so that's how it all turned out. And I've written it. Period.
And we are also thankful for that.
And I've enjoyed it.
Yes. Prem Prakash, the next question is by Ms. Deepa Mishra. She wants to know, sir, what is your take on today's journalists and the kind of reporting that is done?
Well, number one, we have huge many organizations now. Number two, I was asked this question only a few days ago by somebody, and I said, for heaven's sake, please tell your people to go to the field. They don't go to the field. Not many of them go to the field. Because it's only while going to the field.
सिंधु बॉर्डर तक भी नहीं जा रहे हैं आजकल तो. सिंधु बॉर्डर में फार्मर्स है, वहां भी नहीं जा रहे आधे लोग ट्वीट करते हैं.
They see, there you are. And but unless you go to the field, like for example, I was told by editor of Viz News that a dead Prem Prakash would be of no use to us. Agreed. But a live Prem Prakash, how could he report East Pakistan by sitting in Calcutta?
Right.
Right.
So I had to cross the border. I had to cross the border. It was a grave risk I took. How could a dead Prem Prakash report liberation of Goa if it didn't cross into Goa? I'll give you an instance in 1959, which I think I haven't mentioned in the book. Maybe I have, I don't know. I don't remember. When Dalai Lama was moving out, there was a story, and I told my editor it'll take time because I have to long way. It will be at least 15 years before I reach up there and so on. Those days you have to fly to Calcutta, Calcutta to Bagdogra to Sikkim, Gangtok, and then try and go up. And it was all snow covered at the other side. But a story went out from Delhi showing Tibetans crossing into India. Some guy from the an agency competing with the Viz News had taken some Tibetans to the ridge and shot footage there, showing the Tibetans crossing into India and the mountain. Ridge is not a mountain. So I had to go all the way. Changu Lake was frozen. I covered there. Then I went right up to Tula. I even went into the Chumbi Valley on the other side. You have to go to location, and a lot of our young people today don't go to location. And second dangerous thing, which has happened is they have their own opinion instead of reporting facts. Many items get opinionated, which is not right, which I feel not right. They push their opinion, and which is not right. So my advice to young journalists would be, please read a lot, go to location, report facts. Identify your sources properly. You don't have to disclose your sources. Let your editor know it. That's all.
But don't you think these days journalism is more about advocacy and activism rather than journalism?
But that's not journalism. That's real politics, I would say, that if advocacy and all that.
But isn't that why nobody's taking mainstream media very seriously anymore?
I agree with you. It's sad. It's very sad. I mean, where do we have the giants like Frank Moraes, Kasturi Rangan, Mankekar? Where do we have those giants now?
That's very true. Thank you so much.
Noisy people all around.
Sir, just last question. I asked you, tell us some anecdote or a story which you have not reported in the book. Tell us about the vanity of a very big people. Because they will be, because before shooting or before taking picture, they'll be so curious, so careful.
We'll talk in private.
I would now like to call upon Mr. Venkat Narayan to wrap up this extremely engaging session with a vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Akriti. Prem, it's wonderful to see you. Then once we entered the plane, I saw Sharda Prasad, I saw Parthasarathi, who were looking after his media relations, and I even Natwar Singh didn't know anything about this attack. And
yeah, you remember that, what they were trying to do to me. Sharda Prasad said, what are you trying to do? What gossip you are spreading? I said, this is no gossip. Thank God for thank God for Binod Mishra.
And I told him Prem Prakash was the one who was shooting the pictures. He said, okay, I'll take a look at that footage and then come back and brief you on what happened. So then a few minutes later, you come running to me and say, Venkat, what have you done? They took my footage away and I can't send it to anybody. People don't know anything about it. I said,
the fellow station was, he enjoyed making trouble. But you know what happened? I just went to, when I was there with the Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, I sat on the dharna. I said, I first must get my tape back. Only then I will let you go out on that side. So Rajiv told him, he'll give you a copy, give him the tape back. These are laughable, but there I was. I mean, if Binod Kumar Mishra, it was when Sharda Prasad trying to harass me, it was Binod Kumar Mishra who ran to the Prime Minister. Because remember, Binod's sister.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. And
yeah, he brought the Prime Minister in. And
his entourage had no clue that there was an attack on him, and even Jayavardhana did.
No, Rajiv Gandhi knew there was an attack on
And
him.
we arrived in Delhi, and Venkatraman, the president himself, was there. Thousands of
Yes, because they
people came and all that. And
Rajiv
of course,
Gandhi
you got your
was the
footage
person.
and put it out to the world. And
But Rajiv
Why?
Gandhi was attacked.
anyway, so it's very new.
Yeah, this was terrible, yeah.
Listen to a veteran talk about his experiences and write about. Thank you and Akriti and the Prabha Khaitan Foundation for organizing this, and for to Sheila and Sushant for carrying on this conversation, and also the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, taking time off his busy schedule to speak briefly and
thank you all so much. Thank you all
such
so much.
handsome
Sir,
compliments
I'm
to
calling you
Prem for his
tomorrow
work.
first thing in the morning. Give me my exclusive.
An interesting kind of webinar. Thank you very much,
Fascinating,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Fascinating.
Prabha Khaitan Foundation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Mm.